Am I an accidental cult leader? That's a question you've probably never asked yourself, but it's a question I've been asking myself. But please, let me explain why. Sometimes I hear people dismissing Christianity, saying Christianity is a cult. So a couple months ago, I made a video on that topic, and it's been accumulating views faster than any other video I've ever made. And I think it's a good little video, but some of the comments were not what I was expecting. I mean, some people were unconvinced, and that's normal for my channel, but others seemed to think that I was only defending Christianity because I've already been sucked into the cult. Now, the big old plot twist is that I don't think these commenters always realize that I'm not just a Christian, but I'm a pastor. I'm a leader within Christianity. And so if Christianity is a cult, I'm not just in a cult, but I'm actually an accidental cult leader. Okay, now deep down in my heart, I want to say that this question is so stupid that I don't even have to think about it, but I have been thinking about it. And that's because a couple years ago, I committed to not avoiding any question just because it's uncomfortable. Or said another way, I committed to becoming an adventurous truth seeker. In fact, it's why this channel exists. So I think it's time for me to take an even closer look at whether or not I'm an accidental cult leader.
According to Dorothy Martin, December 21st, 1954 was the day God was to destroy the world with a flood. Thankfully, she had received a transmission from Planet Clarion telling her aliens would come before sunrise that day to rescue her and her followers, a group known as the Seekers. Now, Martin didn't know that the group had already been infiltrated by Leon Festinger, a social psychologist who was keen to study the group and the aftermath that would follow Martin's failed predictions. The night before their planned departure, the Seekers prepared diligently for the arrival of their visitors. Many of them had ended relationships, others had given away all their money. And as the clock struck midnight, they sat together in silence, waiting.
I bet when you think of cults, you think of bizarre and violent acts committed by cult members in recent history. And it's tempting to think that cults are just a crazy American problem, but that's not true. Cults and their effects can be felt in Canada too. And while it's the headlines that make us pay attention to cults, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And now it's time for, can't I just Google this? Let's talk about the word cult for a minute. Sometimes people will say something like Jesus was a cult leader, and I think it's worth pointing out that no one would have said that until relatively recently. And that's because the term cult started being used in the 17th century as a French term coming from the Latin cultus, meaning worship. Christianity is a system of worship, and other relatively tame definitions of cult can also be applied to Christianity. But when people today call Christianity a cult, they mean it in a very specific, modern sense that has only become popular in the 20th century. A sense that most people are familiar with, but actually isn't easy to find with a quick Google search. So I'd give the term cult a Googleability grade of moderate. Like, you can Google it, but it's still a little murky. I mean, look how many definitions there are. Plus, a lot of research is still being done. Psychiatrist Dr. Robert J. Lifton has proposed three main characteristics of what makes a cult. A charismatic leader who increasingly becomes an object of worship as the general principles that may have originally sustained the group lose their power, coercive persuasion or thought reform, and economic, sexual, and other exploitation of group members. The focal point of the cult is the cult leader, and cult leaders seem to be cut from the same cloth. They're seen as the only source of truth, they have absolute power, and they act with complete immunity. Another defining characteristic is coercive persuasion and thought reform. And when you hear that, please don't hear lively debate or intense discussion. It's so much more than that. Lifton's research describes radical and often abusive social structures that keep cults together. This includes controlling people through guilt and shame and separating people from their families and society so that the cult becomes their whole identity. Cults will also create and enforce whole subcultural languages that actually limit the ability for cult members to think critically. They also demonize questioning and those that challenge the group. Whether the leaders are delusional or con artists, it's not always clear. Dr. Lifton thinks that they can be both. Whatever the case, cults fabricate a leader who is your only hope, and then a coercive system so powerful that it keeps members committed, even if the abuse and exploitation are devastating.
Dorothy Martin and her followers became increasingly anxious as midnight became 1 a.m. and 1 a.m. became 2 a.m. Group members were already coming up with theories for why the visitors had not yet arrived to rescue them from the coming flood, but the morale of the group was dropping quickly. When 4 a.m. came around, Dorothy received a new transmission from the aliens, telling her that her faith and the faith of her followers had deterred the end of the world. No one was coming. Later, Festinger wrote a book called When Prophecy Fails, documenting the event and also coining the term cognitive dissonance. What Festinger found was that the disappointment some cult members felt led them to forsake the group and return to their normal lives. But Festinger also found that cult members who were already deeply committed, either financially or socially, were far more likely to double down on their commitment to the group. Which is why the Seekers spent the following days trying to convince journalists that their faithfulness had, in fact, saved the world.
You see, the pattern of a cult member is that even when they gain a growing awareness of the lies or abuse, the cult itself is designed to take advantage of their natural desire for security and acceptance and make them believe that there's never a good reason to leave the group. In extreme cases, their perceived dependence on the leader for life itself will sooner have them reinterpret their abuse as a good thing, rather than walk away and, from their perspective, lose everything. What I think is absolutely essential to understand about Dr. Lifton's work is that cults are not defined by a particular kind of belief. The beliefs pretty much change from group to group, and cults are more than just beliefs you find weird. What defines the modern cult is the complex, dangerous, and often abusive social system that is built around a group with shared beliefs. And sometimes people can say kind of flippantly that all religions are cults. Cults are religions, religions are cults, Christianity's stupid, move on. And sometimes what they're really saying is that your beliefs are radical and you only believe them because you're being manipulated, or said even more rudely, you're just a sheep and I don't have to think about your stupid beliefs. But I think that that's oversimplifying the situation, because not all cults are religious. Cults can and do revolve around politics and race and self-help gurus, and now more than ever, online personalities. And for the non-religious person, that sucks, right? Because when cults are a religious person problem, then you don't have to think about it. But I don't think anyone should dismiss any group or their beliefs by simply labeling them a cult. And now it's time for Just So I'm Perfectly Clear. Because cults can be dangerous, I want to be really clear about what I am and am not saying right now. I'm not saying that cults are okay as long as they revolve around true beliefs. They're not okay. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter what you believe as long as your society isn't abusive. It does matter. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't seriously consider whether a group is a cult. You should. I'm just saying that calling a group a cult can be a way of dismissing that group and its beliefs without careful consideration. So that's what I want to avoid. Now that we're clearer on what it means for something to be a cult, let's consider whether Christianity is one. Like cult, there can be several definitions of Christianity, but I think this one's really good. Christianity is the religion based on the person and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. The person of Jesus has to be central to this conversation. And if you're a Christian, some of what's been said so far might have made you feel a little uncomfortable, like part of a cult being a charismatic leader who increasingly becomes an object of worship. On that account, Christianity is guilty as charged, and that can feel a little awkward. But as I paused and thought more about the kind of leader that Jesus was, and especially after studying cults, it was actually really emotional. The accounts we have of Jesus show him leading a community of unconditional love. This community broke cycles of shame and hurt, and some of Jesus' followers found grace and forgiveness for the first time. Jesus famously said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus spends a lot of time answering people's challenging questions, and rather than controlling or manipulating people to stay, he lets them leave by the thousands, and even initiates a conversation with his closest disciples as to whether they'll leave too. And rather than Jesus creating a system where he could exploit people from the top, he made it clear that he's willing to lay down his life for his followers. And he actually did this. He served to the point of exhaustion and was crucified. And for me, this is the real kicker. When people wanted to give Jesus political power, a power that would have detracted from his mission, he rejected that power. Regardless of what you believe about Jesus, he is the most influential person in human history, with a moral character so highly regarded that many world religions claim that Jesus was really a part of their group. Even atheists like Bill Maher, who have made a career out of criticizing Christianity and has a documentary mocking religion, still thinks this about the way of life Jesus taught.
You wish that Christians were more, if they were really going to be Christians, would be more Christ-like.
Don't we all? I think everybody, I mean, that's something I don't think is even controversial. Yeah. That the message of Jesus, which is very good, it's about love and, you know, forgiveness, that gets lost with all the nonsense and the bells and whistles.
So yes, Jesus was a remarkable leader and is worshipped as God. But he was anything but manipulative and abusive. And there's no way that any movement that is actually built on his life and teachings could rationally include a system of coercion and exploitation. Christianity, as modeled by Christ, simply lacks the dangerous leader and social structure necessary to be called a cult. And I know that this is the part where some viewers will want me to make a black and white formal declaration that Christianity is not a cult and say, take that, haters. I mean, just look at Jesus. Case closed. But it's time for some nuance.
It's nuance time. No, not nuance. I like the black and white. It makes me feel safe.
I know. I can feel the same way. But I think that this topic needs careful nuance. There are countless churches sincerely trying to follow Jesus, but there is no limit to the ways humans will corrupt things, even the teachings of Jesus, for personal gain. And it breaks my heart to say that's happened at times. Jesus' teachings are sometimes corrupted and used as a base on which to build a cult. So is Christianity a cult? This is what I would say. Christianity can be corrupted to become a cult community, but Christianity that accurately reflects the heart of Jesus Christ could never be a cult. That's what I think. So am I an accidental cult leader? Well, I really don't think so. And researching this video has inspired me to be the kind of church leader who plays an active role in making sure my community never becomes even remotely cultish. When Christianity reflects Jesus, it enables us to encounter Jesus as we might have face to face. Honestly, my prayer for you is that you'll find a community that accurately reflects the heart of Jesus, and that in that community, you'll be able to sincerely consider whether Jesus is God. And if you still think I'm only saying all this because I'm in a cult, I don't know what else to tell you.